Jake from the Chasing Quality podcast. It's a beautiful morning, but a little bit early. I'm heading out to finally do the suspension work on my car that I've been talking about for probably months now on the podcast. First, I'm gonna clean up the shop I'm gonna clean up the barn a little bit, make some room, and then I'm gonna pull the car in there and see what we've got. I'm gonna do my best to attempt to vlog this thing, just because there really aren't very many videos on how to do this, and so I thought that maybe as I struggle through it, you would enjoy laughing at me and all that, and maybe learn a little bit from my mistakes. So let's clean up a little bit and then pull the car in and then start taking it apart. Okay, so what work do we plan to do today? We're going to change out the struts, the control arms. We're going to change out the wheel hub bearings. That's going to be a little bit tricky because I've actually not been able to find a single video or tutorial on how to do that. So we're going to be kind of playing it by ear on that one. So let's go ahead and pull that car in and try it out. There she is. For the struts, which should be about the only thing we have to worry about from the top, we'll be able to, pull out these nuts here and get those from the top, hopefully on either side. And then most of the other work is going to be really around the wheel well and underneath. So, okay, before we begin, let's talk a little bit about safety and a little bit about the tools that you're going to need. First, about the safety, I assume no responsibility whatsoever if you attempt to do this yourself. I'm not a mechanic, and I did definitely cut corners in what I was doing, so you assume any of this at your own risk. Working on a vehicle, especially if you need to crawl under the vehicle, is incredibly dangerous and could kill you. If you mess up what you're doing, you put on a part the wrong way and your tire falls off, you could easily die on the highway as well. So you assume all of this work at your own risk. As far as tools, I've got a pretty decently stocked shop, wood shop, and some mechanics tools, but I did not have all of the specialty tools that I wish I could have had. But I'll talk through the tools that I used that can get you through this operation. Now let's see. First, you're going to need a set of combination wrenches. I only have a couple here, but you're going to want a good set of combination wrenches, ranging all the way from, I would say you may want 8 millimeters up to 24 millimeters. That was the range of sizes that I used. These will last you for a long, long time, many, many years, and it's worth spending a little bit of money to get a decent set of combination wrenches. A nice set of wrenches, some of the newer ones actually have these ratcheting ends in them. That's very nice and helpful. But so get yourself a good set of combination wrenches. For this, you're going to need millimeters. Metric. For some American cars, you may need SAE, but get yourself a good set of combination wrenches. Next thing you may want is a breaker bar. This is a 24-inch breaker bar with a half-inch socket adapter, half-inch drive. I did have a bit of difficulty using this in some of the tight spaces around the car, and for some of those I used my 18-inch breaker bar, which would have been about this long. And that's got a 3/8 inch drive. Breaker bars are pretty awesome. They will save your back. They're pretty expensive, but I believe that they're worth their weight in gold. You're going to need a good socket set. If you're going to be using an impact driver, get yourself an impact driver set that are powder coated and meant for that kind of torque. This set goes all the way up to 24 millimeters, down as low as 10 millimeters. This was a lifesaver for me. It was most of what I needed, at least for breaking free the parts and that stuff. So this is Tac Life brand. I got this as a present. It's very helpful. But for sockets, regular socket set will do if you're not using an impact driver. Ideally, you would get one that has both metric and SAE, but do yourself a socket set. You may want an impact wrench. This happens to be Cobalt brand, 24 volt. This was very helpful, both for, all the way from pulling off the tire, pulling off the wheel, to breaking free some of the bolts that were a little bit stuck, some of the nuts I couldn't quite get off. So that's helpful. Just be aware that you're not going to be able to fit this in some tight spaces. It's going to be too tight. Next, you're going to need a hammer, or a rubber mallet may work too. Hammer is going to give you a little bit more force, but the mallet may be less likely to damage things, but a hammer was helpful. You're going to need yourself a 36 millimeter, it's 12 points, an axle nut remover socket, or axle nut socket. Again, 36 millimeters, 12 point. This was not regular powder coated and rated for impact. You may want to get one that is rated for impact, but this one worked in a pinch. It was, I think, $10 from Home Depot, Husky brand. Let's see. You're also going to want hex head bits. This is a Lexavon brand. I don't know, I think it was maybe like $15 or so, maybe a little bit more, from Amazon. And it ranges all the way from H2 up to H14 in size. I've used this many, many times working on the BMW, and you definitely will use at least the H5 and the H6. I can't remember if I used any others during this operation, but just get yourself a little kit like this. Very nice to have, very handy. You're also going to need a set of Torx bits or star bits. This is also Lexavon brand. I've been pretty happy with it. I used T40, T30, and T27 doing this, and I've used several other ones on the BMW. I've even used the T60 for some of the bigger things. So you're going to need one of these. You're going to need a set of, these are circlip removal pliers, or it's a circlip removal tool. This is heavy duty. You're going to want one that is heavy duty, because the circlip that you're going to be removing is a pretty large one. It's about that big, and it's under a lot of tension, and so you're going to need something that's heavy duty. Even though these are heavy duty and pretty strong, I still bent a couple of the tips on here. So these were about $40. I got them from Advanced Auto. Pretty good tool. Next, you're going to need something for compressing your springs. When you get the struts out, this came as a pair, and they go around either side of the spring, and you then use a wrench to screw down the bolt, and that will compress the springs and allow you to get the strut out. I do not believe that this is the safest way to go. I believe that a shop spring press is probably the safest bet, but those are also pretty expensive, and most of us do not have those, and most of us do not have a need for those. I felt that these would do in a pinch, and they did. I don't remember what I paid for them, maybe $40 or $50. But be careful, be incredibly careful. This is probably, using these is probably one of the most dangerous parts of the process. You will, of course, need safety glasses, potentially the most important safety equipment that you're going to need for this entire process. Goggles are important. You're going to want some rust penetrant. This happens to be the WD-40 Specialist Rust Release Penetrant Spray, but liquid wrench works well too. Use this to spray down your bolts and your nuts early on to help break through the rust and to make it easier to remove those parts. I would also recommend getting yourself a bunch of disposable nitrile gloves. These are very, very helpful anytime you're changing oil, anytime you're working on your car, anytime you're actually working with paints and solvents and things like that. I keep a box of these handy. It keeps it from getting on my skin. I mean, I still break these eventually. I will bust through them and get a little bit of stuff on my hands, but it's just so much easier to work with these. You get a little bit better grip. You don't rough up your hands as much, especially when you're doing a long job like we were doing on this. You will also need a jack and a set of jack stands. The jack that I use is a low profile jack because the BMW sits down a little bit low, and I needed something to clear it and get under there. And then the jack stands, once I lift the car up with the jack, I put the jack stands on there and I take the jack out. You want something that's solid. Jack stands, a lift, blocks. something that's not going to move. Do not crawl underneath your car with a regular jack holding it up, because it's possible it'll get away. Maybe the hydraulic will give out. It's too dangerous and too risky. You're also going to want some shop rags. That's just helpful. I mean, it's just basic shop things. If you don't have rags, get a roll of paper towels. Those are helpful. But you're going to be spraying a lot and getting oil and dirt and stuff, and you're going to want to kind of clean things up. Another thing that's helpful to have is a wire brush of some sort. This one has seen better days, but it's metal wire, nice and stiff. It allows me to get into little cracks, nooks and crannies and cracks and stuff to get goop out, rust out, and then to just kind of scrub down the bolts when I go to put them back. That's helpful to have. I also will mention lighting. Get yourself some sort of a lamp, or you can get like a reflector type light that you can get for about $10 from a hardware store and put a bulb in it and just connect it into an extension cord. Those often come with clamps that are nice to have. But be sure that you have really good, even high quality lighting on what you're doing, because if you're doing this in the dark, and you may not think it's dark, but, even if you're like outside, but like the sun is shining, yet underneath the wheel well it's shadowed. Be very careful with that. So get yourself some good shop lighting. It'll help you see what you're doing and make it a little bit safer to do it. And lastly, you are going to need, regrettably, and this was the most expensive tool for me, a bearing press. Let's go see what the bearing press looks like. This is a hydraulic press. This is a 12-ton press that I purchased from Harbor Freight. You'll see me using it later on in the video. You are going to need something like this. These bearings that are in the wheel are very large and require a significant amount of force to press them in and to press them out. This is definitely not the best press. You are going to need something with a very large throat, which this one has. If you look carefully, you can see that there are pegs along the sides that allowed me to increase the throat capacity probably as much as 30 inches or so. Harbor Freight sells some cheaper models that are they have a much narrower throat, maybe like 6 inches, but that's not going to be anywhere close. You really need something like this that allows for a lot of adjustment in order to accommodate what you're doing with getting those bearings in and getting those bearings out. One thing that I did not have that you'll see in the video later on is I did not have all the little metal plates and accessories that often machinists keep handy with their hydraulic press. It would have been great if I had a bunch of really thick, strong washers of various sizes. I did not have those, and that made this operation a little bit more complicated. It kept me from getting fully even pressure, and it also, on one side, actually caused me to slightly maybe damage the bearing ever so slightly. I think the bearing's fine. I drove with it; it's fine, but it was not ideal. Ideally, you would have a complete set of little plates, little washers, and other type things for doing hydraulic pressing. But this thing did work really well for my needs, $139, and I could not have done the operation without this. So you are going to need either access to your own by buying one, or have a friend, or go to a shop that will allow you to use their press. There may have been a screwdriver somewhere here and there that I used, but anything else that I used that I didn't mention was not really a specialty tool, and most amateurs are going to have those tools handy. So let's go ahead and move on to the video now, and I hope that you enjoy this. Before we really jack this thing up though, we're going to want to loosen the tires, or loosen the wheels, the lug nuts. Okay, so now I got the car up on jack stands. In theory, it should be pretty safe and secure. I'm going to block the rear wheels though still, just in case. And we're going to go ahead and finish taking off the tires. and then crawl underneath and see what we're going to have to take off. At the very least, there's a large splash shield we're going to have to take off. Well, I now need to stop and head out to the auto supply store to get a different axle nut socket. Apparently I ordered a 6-point and I needed a 12-point and wasn't really even thinking. So really just 1 or 2 steps into the process and I've already hit a roadblock. So let's hope that this doesn't happen too many times as I start taking this thing apart. I do believe I've got everything else I need, I hope. So let's head out and we'll be back. All right, hey there. It's now day 2 of this car work, the suspension rebuild. Ran into a few hiccups yesterday with some of the bearings, so I'm back at it again today. Okay, so we're back working on this thing. What you're going to find is that now we're actually on the right side of the vehicle. Yesterday I started on the left side. I ran into some trouble, and for the sake of having clean video of actually tearing this thing down without too much trouble, I thought I would go ahead and make clean video of the right side. So that's where we're at. Okay, so here we are on the right-hand side of the vehicle, the passenger front wheel. Again, the work we're going to be doing today is we're going to be replacing the wheel hub. The hub is probably in fine condition, but we're going to be replacing the bearing as well, so I figured I'd go ahead and replace both the bearing and the hub. We're also going to be replacing the strut, the strut tower brace. We're also going to be replacing the control arms. We've got 2 control arms, as well as the it's a connecting link, a link arm. I don't know if it's like a tie rod or whatever, but this link arm here, and another bushing as well. Okay, first we need to get this caliper off. And for the caliper, it's going to be a 16 millimeter socket. I don't know why this isn't focusing. Okay, 16 millimeter socket. I'm using a smaller breaker bar. This is only about 18 inches or so, but this is going to be enough to give me just a little bit of leverage to break it free, and then I will go back to my regular ratchet. So there's a bolt up top here that I'm going to have to reach around and get. Okay, so the bottom one didn't want to come off with even my breaker bar, so I'm going to use my impact wrench to get it off. Break it. Bolt 2 is off, and now the caliper's loose. So we can just kind of pull it off here. Now you have to be careful because this caliper's heavy, and it's pulling a lot of, it's probably about 20-25 pounds, and you do not want to dangle it by the by the brake line. So I'm going to set this here for a second, and I'm going to grab a block so that I can set the caliper up on a block. It's a 6 millimeter hex. Lucy. Depending on how long your rotor has been on there, you may need to hold this because it'll fall off. Once I loosen the screw, the whole rotor wants to come off. All right, let's go ahead and get that. We're gonna get the dust shield off. That's gonna be a 10 millimeter socket. Shouldn't be too tough. Okay, now that we've got that off, now you can see a little bit better what we're dealing with here. We've got, this is, I guess this is for the steering column. We're not replacing this, but for what it's worth, this is where you're going to do the alignment, part of the alignment. There's a bolt here that moves in and out. We're not replacing that, but we are going to take this bolt out up here. That's what loosens up the strut. The strut fits into here and is compressed by this bolt. The bolt tightens it around and holds that. We're removing this control arm though and replacing this, and we're replacing this guy down here, which would be the rear control arm. And you can't quite see it from this angle. Let me pick it up and show you. Replacing this guy here, which is I guess a link arm. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it stretches from up here to the top of the strut down to the bottom. To get this link out, it's a little bit tricky, and it's essentially the same thing with all of these suspension components, where you have a nut on the outside, and you've got a small, it's like a star bit. It's a six-sided star that you're going to use. You're going to use really a combo wrench so that you can then fit that other bit in here, and you're going to hold this tight while you unthread it around there, because you don't have anything on the back. The back just sits there. So first I'm going to break it free using my my impact wrench, and then I will use my combo set and a star bit to hold it steady. So that is 16 millimeters, and I believe that I actually have 16 millimeters on here still. So we break it free. Okay, we are free, and let me get my star bit. That's perfect. Okay, so that's a T27 star bit, and again, 16 millimeters. So okay, so I've got the bottom nut off, and now this will just come out and pull it straight out, and there you have it. This one's in decent shape. I believe that I got some video of the other side, of the driver's side, and it was bent. It was bent probably to the point of an inch or two, which would very much affect it. Before we take off the front control arm, you're going to notice that right here, there's this little, it's like a little plastic piece. I'm not really sure exactly what it does there. There's something right here that holds it in, but I'm just going to pull off this nut right here to disconnect it, and then it's going to just hang there for now. I'm going to use my impact driver for that. And now we can take off this control arm. Okay, so this bolt right here is actually a little bit tricky. Let's see if I can zoom in. I don't know if I can get enough light there. There are little clips around it right here, and there are two others that you need to push back a little bit because they're gripping on the bolt and keeping it from falling and moving out. So you move those back. Another problem is that my impact wrench is too big to really get up in here. So I'm going to use again, this is 21 millimeters. But I'm going to use a long breaker bar. Let me see if I can zoom out so you can see this breaker bar. Well, you can't quite see it from there. This is a 2-foot breaker bar for a 1/2 inch. And so I am going to use that to break it free. And then we will use other things the rest of the way. Okay, so now we've got that broken free. Now we're going to need to use one of these star bits. This is a T40 star bit, and then I've got my adjustable wrench that we'll use to pull this off. Again, these are going to go in opposite directions. Okay, and we're off. Boy, you can feel the heat The heat of the friction on that thing is crazy. Okay, so we'll take our hammer. Actually looks like it is already loose a little bit there. Okay, so that's already loose. And then we just have to get up into here to get this bolt out of the other end. It's gonna be a little bit tricky. I don't know if I can get a good camera angle, but I will try. Okay, check that out. I was able to get some view of that, but I took off already. There's a plastic cover that attaches to the wheel well cover and then kind of covers up. It covers up this bolt. You need to remove it. It's got a couple of there's a spot where it's attached to one of the wheel well cover screws, and then a couple of little plastic pins that hold it in. But you need to remove that in order to be able to access this bolt. Okay, this bolt is it's 18 millimeters. So I'm going to actually use my breaker bar again with an 18 millimeter bolt to free it up. Okay, next we're going to take out the lower control arm. That's going to be actually a 24 millimeter socket to get that out. Now we just need to knock this out, which I'm hoping I can do with a hammer. I actually had a problem with the left side in the same way, where I wasn't able to get this off that way. I think I'm going to have to hammer it out or use a press to get it out another way. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the other end of the control arm and just leave this connected. This whole assembly is going to come off, the hub assembly. The whole thing, because the bearing that we're really trying to get to is inside of here. So I'll disconnect the bolt back here, leave this on here. We'll disconnect the strut and take the whole assembly out. All right, to get this lower control arm off, you've got a bolt. It's a through bolt. Bolt starts here, and then there's a nut on the other side. They're both 18 millimeters. This should hopefully not be too bad compared to some of this other stuff, so long as I find my 18 millimeter. And we're free. Okay, now we're going to disconnect the steering, and that is, let's try it out. That is also a 24 millimeter bolt. Luckily, I'll have very easy access to use my impact wrench here to loosen that up. Okay, so we've got that out. Now we can start working. If you see here, we've got this so loose that now we can start actually going after the strut. Before I work at this, on pulling out the strut, though, I'm actually going to go ahead and pull out the I'm going to pull out the wheel hub, because I need to get a pretty good bit of grip to pull it out. Okay, on this hub, you're going to notice you got this giant axle bolt here. But if you look carefully, this is not perfectly round. There are these little grooves, 2 grooves on either side, and there's a little lip or a little piece of the metal here that bends down. It's like a little clip. You have to pull that out. Okay, I think I finally got it. Oh, what a pain in the ass. To remove this axle nut, you're going to need to use a 36 millimeter 12-point socket. This is a Husky. I think I just picked this up at Home Depot. Ideally, you would have something that's made for an impact wrench, I'm okay with using this one because I'm only going to use it a couple times, but if you're going to use it multiple times, or if you get something that's really stuck, you're likely going to want to use something that's powder coated and a little bit stronger than this. All right, so to remove this assembly from the drivetrain, we need to push this through. We need to push this shaft out through the other side. In order to do that, I'm going to use, this is it's like a, sorry if you can see this here, it's like a bearing puller that I'm going to set on there. Let me zoom out. It's like a bearing puller, and you can do all sorts of things with it. But in this case, I'm going to use this bolt here that's going to screw through. I'm just going to push this point out the other side. So you take this thing, and you grab your lug nuts, and you screw it back into here. And get it. Okay, so we're back to here. This bolt here is 19 millimeters, and so we're just going to start turning it in. What's going to happen is that center point is going to push. Okay, so that's pushed out the other side. I really hope that's not an indication of how hard it's going to be to get this thing back in, but now that I pushed out the other side, this whole thing is out. You'll see it once we take this off. You'll be able to see it. This goes into your wheel hub, and this turns the wheel. So you get these teeth. I'm hoping that that'll go in pretty easily when it's time to get it back in. I'm not necessarily banking on that, though. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty tough. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to use one of my, I think it's an H5. Okay. Next, we are going to remove the bolts from this connects to the strut. So we're going to take this off, and then we can easily just pull the whole strut out of here. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and remove this assembly from the strut. This is 18 millimeters. Of course, it's got a nut on the back side, so you're going to need a wrench on the back. I'll use my impact on the. In order to be able to get the strut disconnected from here, we've got to put a wedge in this gap. We're going to drive a wedge in there. I've got a cold chisel on my run get, and we're going to drive that cold chisel in there. That's going to expand this out ever so slightly, which will allow this to drop down and out from the strut. And we're going to drive this into here as a wedge using a hammer.
That bolt is nasty. That's nasty.
Okay. All right. You gotta watch it. That's pretty heavy. So we now have that whole assembly off. You'll notice here on the strut that there are these little nubs. Those nubs fit in there and keep it from spinning around. Most of it's through the grip, the tightening action of that bolt. But you also have these little nubs that keep it then from spinning. One of the reasons why I'm changing the struts, other than the fact that they're just getting old, they do have 130,000 miles and 12 years on them. But in the wintertime, when it got cold, when it would get cold, the bearings on the strut tower brace were basically freezing up and getting crunchy and causing the steering to be jerky and causing a nasty, horrible, loud cracking sound. It sounded like ice was cracking in my engine bay. And it wasn't, I don't know if it was necessarily due to moisture, but it was certainly causing problems. And so that's part of it. I needed to replace those. But in order to replace those, you have to take out the whole strut anyway. And while you're taking out the struts themselves aren't too terribly expensive if you're just going with, kind of an OEM type of strut. So it's worth replacing the strut. The struts were in need of that. So let's go ahead and then get to the top of the engine bay and get this strut out. All right, so here we are in the engine bay. We're on the passenger side. This is the strut housing support, there are 3 nuts that hold the top of the strut, or hold actually the strut tower brace into the strut tower. And some people will mark these with ink or paint or something to let them know where the nut has been. I'm going to have this thing aligned pretty immediately after getting this done anyway, so I'm not too terribly worried about it. Let's go ahead and get these bolts removed. These are 13 millimeter nuts. They're not on there too terribly tight. You are going to want to be careful once you've loosened these up, because we don't have anything holding the spring and strut except for these 3 nuts. So as soon as I loosen them to basically hand torque, finger torque, I am going to reach down there and hold it, and then take these off one by one with my left hand. Okay, so now we've got the strut here and with the spring attached. You're going to need some sort of spring compressor to be able to compress down these springs to be able to get the strut off. It would be great if you had a nice shop spring compressor, but those are pretty pricey. What I got was, I got these guys. These things will, they're little notches here that attach to the spring and to the strut tower brace, and then you twist this and it compresses it down. That compression of the spring allows you to pull the strut out, allows you to unscrew it and pull it out. So let's go ahead and do just that. I would caution you that this is the most dangerous part of the entire operation, unless you crawl underneath your car. If you crawl underneath your car, that may be the most dangerous spot. That will kill you pretty instantly if your car falls. But these springs are incredibly strong, and this could potentially kill you or hurt you really badly too if you take a spring to the face or chest or whatever. Okay, all right, I've got them hand tightened. Again, the goal is, this is the strut tower, I guess, brace, the bearing that we need to get removed. Once we remove this, then the strut itself will come out, and then we can put the new strut in, and then put the new tower brace bearing in there. So I'm going to grab my ratchet and tighten that down. And these are 19 millimeters. I got these off of Amazon. I don't remember what I paid for them. They weren't too terribly expensive for what they are. You definitely want to make sure, though, that they're safe. Again, this spring takes a lot of force. This cap comes off. Inside of there, you can see a bolt. There's a bolt, and these bearings are pretty much dry. There's no grease left in there. Okay, so that's a 22 millimeter bolt using a 22 millimeter socket. I'm going to use this impact wrench to get it free. Now, there is a tool, a special tool that they sell to be able to get this out. My hope is that I can actually get it out with this driver. Okay, so I was able to get it off with this driver, but this is a lot like everything else that I've showed you with the suspension, which is that there'll be a nut that goes around the threads, and then like an inner nut that or like an inside space where you're going to use a different driver. There are these two washers, and pay careful attention to the orientation when you take them out and off, because you have to replace them in exactly the same way in order for the bearings to work properly. So just pay careful attention to that if you weren't already. And then that comes out. This old strut is not in good shape. It doesn't move freely like this. This one moves freely. It's fully extended. If you see, let's compare these struts. See how far out let's compare these struts. See how far out the new one is extended. The other one's just kind of resting, like half compressed, and it's in really bad shape. So this new strut is going to hopefully make a huge difference. All right, let me take off the new nut there. I'm gonna move all of this stuff over here. Now, keep in mind and be very careful, we still have these springs under some serious tension. So we're gonna reuse the boot. I probably could have gotten a new boot. I did not because I just didn't think about it, but I'm not too worried about the boot. We are going to reuse the spring pads here. These are little pads that will essentially go where the other one went. There's a little nub in here that fits into the hole. So you know how to line it up. And then we put on the new boot here. We feed this back up through here. We are going to have to be careful with that there. The boot doesn't like really fitting through those springs, but it's okay. We just tighten that up. And then you need to orient this so that you've got the end of the spring, if I can find the end of the spring, lined up with the pad for the spring. This is the new strut strut tower brace with bearing. You can kind of compare it to the old. I don't know how you can see it, if you can see it in the camera very easily, but the old one is just really nasty. The grease is dried up, cracked out, and caked and gross. This other one has nice new grease, a lot smoother. And so we're going to put back the washers as we found them. Right back on there. Don't forget to put the cap back on the top here to protect the bearing and the grease. And then we're done. Now we can go ahead and install this one back up into the strut tower. We're not going to fully install everything yet because we still have to work on the wheel hub and the bearings. So let's go ahead and we'll temporarily install this up into the strut tower and clean up. Okay, so this is now day 3 of the suspension rebuild for the 535xi. It's not so much that it's taken me 8 to 12 hours a day. It's that I keep running into little glitches or needing tools. So last night I actually had to make a run to Harbor Freight in order to get a bearing press. I, as an amateur, believe that I could find another way to get these bearings in and out using some other tools and some pipe clamps and whatnot. But they simply require too much force. So I ended up getting a 12-ton hydraulic press for $139 from Harbor Freight. I'll show it to you in a second. That is going to be necessary to get the bearing out of the wheel assembly and to push the new bearing back in, and to also push the new wheel hub back in. I don't know if I'm going to ever use this tool again, so I may end up just selling it or keeping it. It wasn't really, honestly, too terribly expensive for what it is. but it's indispensable. Frankly, it took me 1 minute to accomplish something I couldn't do in 3 hours. So let's go ahead and move over to that part of the shop, and I'll show you what we're working on now. All right, so this is the hydraulic press that I got from Harbor Freight. It is 12 tons, and essentially you've got a bottle jack at the top, and the springs hold it kind of up to the top as you start adding pressure to the jack. So as you start pumping it, the ram will come out of the top, and it'll push the jack and the plate and the little rod down at the bottom, the ram. It'll push it downward, and then you've got this cross support that will hold a couple pieces, and that ram will basically push onto the bearing or whatever you're pushing, and it will push it through and out. This, if you've got a good eye, you can actually see that this is off kilter. It is not square. This is how it came from Harbor Freight, regrettably. It's a quality control issue, and I think it's what you're going to expect with cheap parts, and that's really what Harbor Freight generally sells. But again, I'm only going to use this probably a couple times, so I really didn't care to spend a lot of money on it. But it is very much out of square, and I would have to weld on a couple parts of my own in order to square it up. Probably not worth the time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and set this up, and we will work on pushing out some bearings. Okay, so this is what we're going to be working on today. We have got this is the wheel assembly that we pulled out. Here we've got the wheel hub, and if you can see, it's got the teeth here. It attaches to the axle or to the drivetrain, and this spins freely inside. The wheel actually attaches to here, and the wheel spins from the outside, driven by the axle there. We need to pull this out, or actually we're actually going to press it out. And then on the inside, on the other side, you can see the wheel bearing. So the wheel hub sits inside the wheel bearing then sits inside of this entire assembly. So we're going to need to pull out the wheel hub. There is a circlip that's holding, a retaining circlip that's holding in the bearing. We'll pull that out, and then we'll press out that bearing, and then we will go ahead and press in the new bearing, put in the circlip, and press the new wheel hub back into place. We are also going to be replacing the ball joint here. This is actually pretty stiff. This is not in good condition anymore. We're going to replace that, and we're also replacing this control arm here. We'll probably replace that when we're actually back out on the car. I'll probably take it out and then replace it outside. So that's what we're doing. Let's head over to the hydraulic press. All right, so first we're going to press out the wheel hub, and that's going to be a little bit tricky because I need to get a bit of a gap, and I'm not sure how I'm going to obtain that gap. Okay, so I know that this is not maybe the smartest or the safest way of doing this, but honestly, the way that the wheel hub is oriented inside of that assembly is going to make it incredibly difficult to do this any other way. So I have to have some sort of support over here to hold this side of the assembly, and a support over here to hold this side of the assembly, because the entire bottom piece is really that wheel hub. So luckily the wheel hub isn't in there quite as tight as the bearing itself, so I should be able to pop this out without too much trouble. We're going to try it out. So I've got a piece of wood over here, the stack of wood over here, and the inside I've got some, this is just a gigantic socket and another plate that are sitting on top of the other side of the wheel hub. I need to center it underneath of the ram. Let's go ahead and make sure this is closed. And then we're just going to start. All right, so keep your eye on the bottom as I'm pushing this through. out. Okay, so now we can start taking these off. And as you can see here, we now have the hub out. There's the old hub. The hub wasn't in bad shape. I probably could have reused it, and I probably could have saved myself some money. I don't really see these things failing, but while I'm changing everything out, I might as well change this out as well. I'm hoping I will never have to do this again. I'm doing it at 130,000 miles, and if my car gets another 130,000 miles, that would be amazing. All right, so we've got that out, and now we need to tackle the bearing itself, but first we have to get this circlip out of here. I'm hoping you can see that. We'll get this circlip out of here, and we got to take that over to the bench now. Okay, so now we have, we've got a retaining clip. It's called a circlip right here on the inside, and it's under tension, and it kind of springs. Once you put it in there, it kind of springs and fills in the groove that's on the inside there, and it holds the bearing from being able to pop out. It is a real pain in the butt to get it out, and I had to get a special tool. I had to purchase these. I got these from Advanced Auto. They are essentially a circlip removing tool or a retaining clip removing tool. And you need to make sure that you get one that's strong enough, because these were heavy duty. These were about $40. These are really strong. And so you need something that's heavy duty. You can't get one that's for smaller clips. You have to really get the heavy duty ones. I'm going to spray some liquid wrench in here to kind of loosen this up. And I've got a screwdriver here ready to help kind of pry little pieces. I'm also going to put on some safety glasses, because honestly, this thing's under a lot of tension. If it goes flying, I don't want to go flying into my eyeball. There we go. And that's what this circlip looks like. Okay, I think we had some success. Yes, we did. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to switch the angle of the camera so you can see that bearing slipping out. And we have success. We have gotten it out. What a pain, but without this hydraulic press, I really think this would have been nearly impossible for me. The amount of pressure that I had to put on this thing in order to pop it free that first time, this is a 12-ton jack. I'm guessing that it was probably, you know, at least 2 tons, if not 4 tons of pressure that was being pushed through there. So that was, you know, 4,000, 6,000 pounds of pressure to get that thing popped out. I have a feeling the new bearings are going to go in a lot easier than these came out. But yeah, this was a real challenge. Okay, so we've got it out. We've got the bearing out. You're going to want to make special note of which side goes in first. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to get the clean bearing. Set this here for a second. me get a clean, brand new bearing to show you. All right, so let's focus here. You see that okay? All right, so right here, around one edge is a little line. It's like a little black, actually kind of like a dark gray line that runs around that corner, or around the edge. This other edge does not have it. This edge, with the gray line that wraps around it, that goes in. That goes in first. Gosh, that's nasty. I'm gonna have to clean that out. That goes in first. The smooth part, that's going to be what's going to point out to this other side. So you're going to have to take note of that and remember that. So let's get this thing cleaned up because it is. Let's get this thing cleaned up because it is pretty nasty, and get ready for the new bearing. But basically, we're going to press the new bearing in. We're going to replace the circlip, press in the wheel hub, and then we're going to replace this ball joint over here, and we should be good to go. Okay, now we've got to reverse the procedure, and we've got to figure out how exactly I want to do this. We can put the bearing, just set it flat on the plates, but I've got to figure out exactly what I'm going to put on this other side here to push this whole thing down. I don't know yet. Ideally, it would be a nice piece, strong piece of metal, but I don't really have a nice strong piece of metal sitting around to do just that. So I'm going to look around the shop and see if I can find something. Okay, so I think I found something. We're going to see if this works. I do have my safety goggles on because this is probably not safe, but I will tighten this up here. My concern is that this is going to get bent. It's nice and thick, but it is, actually maybe it's thicker there. Let me do it there. But it's stretched across an expanse. So let's go ahead and start pumping this and see if we can get this to push down onto the bearing, hopefully with equal pressure. This is when it pays to have a fully stocked wood shop. This happens to be a wedge. It's a splitting wedge for logs. It is nice and robust, and I am hoping that I can use it the rest of the way here where that other thing bent, as long as I can get the reach I need. And I would say that we're in. Let's go ahead and release this. And let's check it out. Let's take it over to the bench and check it out. Okay, so now we have that bearing in. We are going to need to put in, let's see here. We're going to need to put the circlip right in here, and then we will put in the wheel hub. We'll press the wheel hub in, so we grab our little circlip pliers here, or wrench, or whatever we call this thing. I'm going to put on my glasses here. We've cleaned this up quite a bit. I probably should have just replaced the thing, but I guess I'm being a little bit cheap. Let's get this thing like that. Should be a lot easier to put in than it was to take out, mostly because there is no rust now. Or a little bit of rust, but not too much. It's cleaned up. And it just sits right in there. Perfect. Okay, I almost forgot. Before we start, before we put in the wheel hub, we need to make sure that we put the dust shield or whatever this is, back on here, because the wheel hub will fit inside of here. I will close the jack, and I will just start pressing this down. I think we are good now. Let's take it off. Let's see. Okay, so I had to make a couple adjustments, but we should be good to go. Should be good to go now. I've got to remove this ball joint here on the side. I've got to do it for both of them. Sprayed them down with liquid wrench. Hopefully that will, keep them loose, or get them loose. Okay, well, I got the ball joint out. I ended up having to take it. I couldn't knock it with the hammer. I ended up having to take it over to the hydraulic press. It wasn't pretty, so I didn't record it, but I got it out. It took a good bit of force to pop it out. It shouldn't take nearly as much force to get this thing back in. The other one was... And there's a new guy. He's nice and stiff, but moves a little bit smoother than the old one. Let me show you the old one. Okay, so this is the one that I took out. You can see how it was rusted here around the base where it fit into the assembly, and that's partly why it was so difficult to get out. I do have a crack forming right here. You can see a couple cracks there around the boot. Okay, so now with this new ball joint installed, with the bearings installed, new hub installed, I think this thing's ready to go. I think we're ready to put this back in. I have to do the other side, which should be a little bit quicker than this side, since I now have a better idea of what I'm actually doing. And then we will start reassembling the car. Okay, and we are back, and we are ready to start putting everything back. And it's pretty much just the reverse of what we did to take it off. I am going to start by putting the wheel assembly onto, I'm going to attach that to the strut here. If you remember, the strut is going to have these two little nubs that stick out that will fit into the gap that is in the wheel assembly. I'm going to use a wedge to increase that gap ever so slightly, and then we can fit it onto here. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so now it should be compressed enough to hold it tight. If you can see down here, it's nice and flush against the bottom. So I do want to remind you, when we put the strut into the tower, we put it in there a little bit more temporarily. So the nuts on top are not very tight. It's just something to remember. I'm going to have to tighten those later, but I'm going to leave them a little bit loose now, just to give me a little bit of working room. Okay. So next, what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm actually going to go ahead and put this the axle back into this wheel assembly, because once we start putting on the other pieces, the control arms and stuff, we're not going to have a lot of room to play. So I just have to try to get this lined up where it's going to hit the teeth. so now that we've got that on, and it looks good, we need to, I'm going to use my chisel to do this, we need to close these little wings so that this nut cannot back itself off. Very good. I think that we're good to go there. Now we can start reconnecting these pieces. So we've got the tie rod here that goes up right. Okay, so we've got that part of the control arm connected. Now we're going to connect it to the ball joint that is secured inside of the wheel assembly. Next, we got our choice between the link from the top of the strut that runs to the sway bar. I think that I'd like to do the, we're going to go ahead and do the rear control arm. Let me see if I can get this focused in on where we, let's see. Okay, I'm having trouble getting a good angle on this control arm based on where it is with the camera, but if you can see this part moving back there, that is the inner side of the control arm, and it's going to fit right there. I need to find my bolt for that. This bottom part here is going to feed into the bottom. There's a ball joint here. Once I take this off, you can see the ball joint. I'm going to take that off. Okay, so this ball joint here at the other end of the control arm is going to fit up into the wheel assembly. I may actually, let me go ahead and loosely put it in there. Okay, next we're going to connect in, this is the sway bar link. It connects from the top of the strut down to the sway bar underneath, which I can't quite fit in the frame right now. Before I do this though, I want to show you the old sway bar from the driver's side of the vehicle. I don't know if you can see that, but it's terribly, terribly bent. I'd hit a pothole on the highway, and I hit it really hard, and it was a really nasty pothole. I was going about 55 miles an hour, which not only popped the tire, but also, I guess, did some suspension damage. So. There's a bracket that attaches to the wheel assembly, which then attaches around the strut, and I really should have gone ahead and tightened the strut, but I didn't. So let's do that right now. Okay, so now we're at the top, the strut tower here, and we need to just finish tightening these bolts here. Okay, so now we're putting on the dust shield. It goes like so. 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4. They are 10 millimeter. I'm going to hand tighten them and then use my impact driver for the rest of it. Okay, that is on. So I'm going to set this here, and I'm going to secure it just a little bit with one of these lug nuts so that I can get the... For the caliper, it's something worth noting is that the brakes are under an incredible amount of pressure, and it's quite possible that once you take the caliper off, your pads, the cylinder inside of your caliper has actually expanded a little bit more and pushed your pads inward more in a clamping fashion. So you may need something like a C-clamp, like I've got here, to basically decompress the caliper. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to make sure that I can actually fit it back on to the Okay, this caliper is now secure. Caliper secure, rotor secure, dust shield. The only thing that I really have left before I put the tire back on, I believe, is to replace the plastic wheel well covers. I'm going to go ahead and do that. That's not something that you need to worry about. I mean, you do need to worry about it, but it's not going to be something complicated. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that. I'm going to replace the splash shield underneath, and then I'll see you again when I get the tires on. All right, so now we're taking the car out for a test drive. I did shower first for you. I hope you appreciate that. Let's get this gate open here. We'll see how it runs. I think I'm pretty excited about it maybe being a little bit smoother. It's going to need an alignment, so it's not going to be 100%. So I have a feeling that with the four-wheel drive and stuff, we're probably going to get like a slight bit of friction on the tires, and that may cause a little bit of vibration. But we'll see. We'll see if I broke this thing. And we're turning on the road here. So far, so good. Very smooth. Very smooth. I'm not getting the vibration that I was getting before. On a winter's day when it was cold, I would get an incredible amount of vibration, and the wheel was just very, very shaky and hard to deal with. But it got to the point actually where even on summer's days, summer's mornings, I would get a lot of vibration right when I would start the car and start driving off. And I'm guessing it's that the grease was just kind of drying up and caking and not doing so hot. But this is great. It's definitely a lot smoother. Again, we're gonna have to check the alignment and see how that goes. We're on a highway. We're doing 55 miles an hour right now. I wasn't getting a ton of noise before from the bearings, but I was getting some noise, so that was a little bit annoying. The wheel is not shaky. I mean, this is a sports car, so it's gonna pick up most bumps along the road, but the steering wheel is nice and smooth, nice and solid. No problems. I'm not getting any squeaks, not getting any pops. The wheel hasn't fallen off yet, so that's good. So I think I'm pretty happy. I think that, did I save myself a lot of money in doing this? With the tools that I had to buy, in the end, I don't know if I saved myself a ton of money. The circlip remover tool was about $40. The hydraulic press was about $140. Most of the other tools I already had, so I didn't really spend much on tools. Oh, I guess I spent about $20 on the axle nut socket. So that was about $200. So total time investment was, it should have been probably about 8 hours, but because I'm an amateur, I didn't know what I was doing. I kept running out for tools. It added up, and so I probably spent closer to 20 hours. I did not have a shop give me a quote. I tried to get a shop to give me a quote, and they never called me back. I'm guessing that labor for this, plus the markup on the parts, it would have probably cost me another $1,200 to $1,500 beyond what I paid. The parts that I paid, the parts that I bought, struts, bearings, hubs, control arms, link arms, all that stuff, that all added up to about $1,200. My guess is that if I were to have this work done by a shop, they would have charged me about $2,500 to maybe $3,000 to have it all done. They probably would have done it better, and I know I would have saved myself a ton of time, but I learned a lot along the way, and now I'm a lot more confident in doing work like this. I did make a couple mistakes, but it seems to be running just fine, and so I'm very happy. I'm very happy with how it turned out. All right, so I guess that's all there is to say about the wheel bearings and suspension components and struts on a 2008 BMW 535xi, aka the e60 N54. I hope that you found this useful. I have not been able to find another YouTube video out there that actually talks about the four-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive 5 Series and changing out these bearings. So I hope that I saved you a little bit of time. I hope I gave you a confidence boost that you can do it. If you get those extra tools that I mentioned and you take your time, I really think that you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to save yourself a little bit of money. If you have not checked out our podcast, please do check out. It's the Chasing Quality Podcast. You can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, all the major podcasting platforms, or you can go directly to our website where we get our podcast hosted. That will be chasingquality.transistor.fm, and you can find all of our episodes there. If you want to leave us feedback, you can leave us feedback there as well. But until next time, you just keep chasing that quality, because you know I will. Bye-bye.